Most people assume that losing leg strength is an automatic result of aging. But that's not what the data actually show. What we're seeing is that disuse, a lack of consistent, forceful, and varied movement, is the primary driver behind that loss. The body is incredibly efficient. If you stop providing the stimulus that tells it, hey, we need these muscles to perform load-bearing tasks, to move quickly, to stabilize us, then it begins to downregulate those systems. Muscle tissue is metabolically expensive. It requires resources, protein, oxygen, hormones, neural activation just to maintain. If the body perceives that the muscle isn't needed, it starts breaking it down. This process called atrophy can begin within just a few days of inactivity, not weeks, days. And it's not just the muscle fibers that shrink. The nervous system adapts too. The motor units, the connections between nerves and muscle fibers, become less efficient at recruiting the muscle. So even if the muscle is still there, your ability to activate it weakens. That's a neural degradation caused by disuse, not just by age. It's the same principle we see in astronauts. When they're in zero gravity and their legs aren't under load, they lose strength rapidly, not because they've aged, but because the signal of you need to use this muscle has been removed. Your daily environment, whether you're climbing stairs, walking on incline, doing resistance training, is constantly telling your system whether to preserve or discard strength. And when that signal gets quiet, the system starts to shut down. So when someone in their 50s, 60s, or even 40s says they're losing leg strength because they're getting older, what's more often true is that their movement patterns have changed. They've stopped sprinting, stopped lifting, stopped challenging their lower body with meaningful load, and the body is just following instructions. You're not using this, so we'll start removing it. To really understand why leg strength declines, we have to talk about the brain, specifically the motor cortex. This is the region of the brain that generates the signals telling your muscles to contract. Every time you walk, squat, jump, or even shift your weight from one leg to the other, the motor cortex is firing, sending signals down your spinal cord to activate the necessary muscle groups. Now here's what's critical. The motor cortex is plastic, meaning it's constantly adapting based on use. If you're regularly engaging your legs in forceful, coordinated movements, the motor cortex stays active and responsive. It maintains strong, clear communication with your muscles through the neuromuscular pathways. But when movement decreases, when you stop training, stop walking uphill, avoid stairs, or just sit for long periods, the motor cortex begins to quiet down. This isn't just a passive process. The brain actually starts to downregulate the connections between neurons and muscles. Fewer motor units are recruited. Firing rates slow down. Coordination becomes sloppy. And this reduced signaling translates directly into weaker muscular output, even if the muscle mass hasn't changed yet. This is a classic example of what's called use diplasticity. The nervous system remodels itself based on demand. No demand, no activation. No activation, reduced strength. So when we talk about strength loss, we're not just talking about muscle. We're talking about communication between your brain and your body falling apart due to underuse. And the good news here is that the opposite is also true. When you reintroduce challenging movement, especially under load with speed or with instability, the motor cortex lights back up. The system becomes more efficient. Your ability to produce force increases, not just because the muscle is growing, but because the brain is once again involved in the process of movement. Another key piece that often gets overlooked when we talk about leg strength is proprioception, your body's ability to sense where it is in space. It's what allows you to walk on uneven ground without looking at your feet or to catch your balance when you trip. And this sense is tightly linked to the activation of stabilizer muscles, the small, often invisible muscles that support your joints and coordinate fine motor control. And proprioception is strong. Your brain is constantly receiving feedback from receptors in your joints, muscles, and connective tissue. That feedback allows for rapid, precise adjustments in movement. It tells your nervous system how to distribute force, how to stabilize your knees or hips under load, and how to recruit muscles efficiently. In other words, good proprioception supports powerful, safe movement. But when you stop challenging your balance, when you stop moving in multiple directions, stop training on unstable surfaces, or stop engaging in dynamic movement, those feedback systems begin to degrade. The stabilizers aren't being called upon, so the brain stops prioritizing them. And once those deep stabilizing muscles weaken, the larger, more visible muscles, like your quads or glutes, can't function optimally. The system becomes less coordinated, force output drops, joint strain increases, and overall strength begins to decline faster. It's not just about big muscle groups, it's about integration. The ability of your brain, joints, and muscles to work together with precision. And proprioception is the foundation of that integration. When it's lost or diminished, the whole structure becomes less efficient and you start to feel weaker, not just because the muscle is smaller, but because the entire feedback control loop has broken down. And again, this isn't permanent. The system responds rapidly to training when you reintroduce movement patterns that challenge balance and coordination, single leg work, multi-directional drills, dynamic loading. Those proprioceptive pathways start firing again. Stabilizers re-engage, and the legs begin to feel stronger, not just from size, but from restored control. Now let's go a layer deeper into the physiology of energy production and blood flow. When we think about strength, we often focus on muscle fibers or nerves. But what powers those fibers? What sustains repeated contractions? The answer is blood flow and mitochondrial function. Every time you move your legs, especially under load or at speed, you increase blood flow to those muscles. That blood delivers oxygen, nutrients, and hormones, and it removes waste products like carbon dioxide and lactic acid. It's not just circulation. It's the fuel delivery and waste removal system that keeps your muscles functioning efficiently. But here's the problem. When the legs are inactive for long periods, the vascular system in those muscles begins to regress. Capillary density drops, arterial elasticity decreases, blood delivery becomes less efficient. And that reduced perfusion means less oxygen gets to the muscle tissue, especially during exertion. You fatigue faster, recovery takes longer, power output declines. On top of that, mitochondrial function, the cellular engines that produce ATP, your energy currency, also starts to decline. Mitochondria respond directly to movement. If the demand for energy goes down, the body reduces the number and efficiency of mitochondria in the cells. So you may have the same size muscle, but its ability to generate energy is weaker. And without sufficient ATP production, even basic movements feel more strenuous. This is especially true in the legs, which contain some of the largest muscles in the body. They require massive energy output to generate real force. And when blood flow and mitochondrial function are compromised, those muscles simply can't perform. So what you perceive as strength loss is often energy failure at the cellular level. The good news is both of these systems are highly adaptable. Walking at a brisk pace, doing resistance training, engaging in high-intensity intervals, all of these immediately upregulate vascular growth and mitochondrial biogenesis. In other words, the body begins rebuilding the infrastructure for strength as soon as you provide the signal that it's needed. It's also critical to talk about the hormonal piece because this is where a lot of misinformation tends to creep in. There's a widely accepted narrative that as we age, Anabolic hormones like testosterone, growth hormone, and IGF-1 simply decline, and that there's nothing we can do about it. But that's not entirely accurate. Yes, there is a gradual age decline, but what's more powerful is how responsive these hormones are to behavior, especially physical stress. Let's take testosterone as an example. This hormone plays a major role in maintaining muscle mass, strength, and recovery. But it doesn't just float through your body at a constant level. It responds to input. Resistance training, especially compound lifts, explosive movement, and high-intensity effort creates a surge in testosterone and other anabolic hormones. And that surge is what tells your body, we need to preserve and build muscle tissue. The same is true for growth hormone and IGF-1. These are crucial for tissue repair, recovery, and cellular regeneration. But they are secreted in pulses, not continuously, and those pulses are amplified when you introduce stress. Not the chronic psychological kind, but the acute physical kind, lifting heavy, sprinting, cold exposure, even certain forms of fasting and sleep quality. These are all levers that increase anabolic signaling. So when we see a person losing strength and assume it's just because their hormones are lower, what we're often missing is that their hormonal signaling has gone quiet, because the stimuli that would normally trigger those hormones, physical stressors, are no longer present. The system isn't broken, it's idle. And again, this is reversible. When you reintroduce strategic stress, controlled, challenging, physical effort, the endocrine system responds. Not in a way that takes you back to age 20, but in a way that's meaningful enough to build strength, restore tissue quality, and improve overall vitality. The key is understanding that your body's hormonal environment is not just a product of age, it's a reflection of the signals you're sending it daily. Let's shift to another often invisible but incredibly powerful factor: inflammation, specifically chronic low-grade systemic inflammation. This isn't the kind of acute inflammation you get after a workout. That's normal and even beneficial. This is the kind of background noise that stays elevated all the time, and it has a major impact on your ability to recover, rebuild, and ultimately maintain muscle strength. When you train or stress your muscles, you create micro tears, tiny bits of damage that your body repairs, coming back stronger than before. But that repair process depends on a precise, time-sensitive immune and hormonal response. If inflammation is already elevated in the background due to poor sleep, processed food, high stress, sedentary behavior, or metabolic dysfunction, that repair process becomes delayed or dysfunctional. The body doesn't enter full recovery mode when it's already on high alert. Instead, resources that would normally go toward regeneration get diverted to managing systemic stress. That slows down tissue repair, reduces protein synthesis, and actually increases muscle breakdown. Over time, even small workouts can leave you feeling sore for days, or worse, push you toward injury instead of adaptation. And this is where strength begins to deteriorate in a very real way. Not because you aren't trying, not because the effort isn't there, but because the internal environment is working against your recovery. The muscles aren't being fully rebuilt. The nervous system isn't restoring its readiness. The tissue remains in a low functioning state. This is why inflammation needs to be addressed head on. It's not just about avoiding disease, it's about creating the conditions necessary for physical resilience. That means prioritizing sleep, reducing refined sugars, managing stress, and training intelligently, not excessively, but with enough intensity to signal adaptation. Because if the system is chronically inflamed, strength becomes very hard to hold on to, let alone rebuild. There's also a psychological layer to leg strength loss that's often underestimated, but it plays a massive role. It starts with something simple, maybe a moment of imbalance, a misstep, or a feeling of instability during a workout. The brain registers that as a threat. And from that moment, it begins to create protective behaviors. You start avoiding certain movements. Maybe you stop going downstairs quickly. You stop squatting low. You avoid uneven ground. The nervous system is trying to keep you safe, but it does that by reducing your exposure to the very movements that maintain strength. This is what we call a negative feedback loop. The less you move, the less confident you feel. The less confident you feel, the more you avoid. The more you avoid, the weaker you get. And that weakness reinforces the fear, so the loop gets tighter and more automatic. It's not that your body can't move. It's that your brain has decided it's too risky to even try. This avoidance isn't just mental, it becomes physiological. When you stop moving in certain ways, especially under load or with speed or with balance involved, your nervous system reduces its capacity to perform those tasks. Muscles atrophy, stabilizers shut down, proprioception dulls. The hardware is there, but the software has gone offline. Breaking that loop requires deliberate, progressive exposure to the movements you've been avoiding. Not reckless, not painful, but structured, intelligent reintroduction. This is where practices like controlled step-ups, tempo squats, or even slow motional lunges on unstable surfaces come in. They retrain the brain to say, this is safe, this is possible. And over time, confidence and strength return together. The bottom line is that the brain and body adapt to what you do, but they also adapt to what you avoid. And when you avoid movement out of fear or discomfort, that avoidance itself becomes the reason strength continues to decline. So when we talk about losing strength in the legs, we have to move beyond the idea that it's just aging. What we're really looking at is a system that's responding to underuse, to muted neural signaling, to impaired blood flow, hormonal silence, chronic inflammation, and psychological avoidance. None of these are irreversible, they're adaptations, and that means they can be reprogrammed. Your body listens to what you repeatedly tell it. If you say, through your actions, I don't need this strength, it will take it away. But if you begin to send the opposite message through movement, through intensity, through consistency, the nervous system will respond, the muscles will adapt, the blood vessels will grow, the mitochondria will multiply, and the strength will come back. It's not about turning back the clock, it's about reactivating the systems that never fully shut off. You're not too old, you're just under-signaled. Start sending the right signals, and your body will remember exactly what to do.